They thought the parrot was tormenting the baby. They couldn't have been more wrong. The African gray had been on the crib rail for the 4th night in a row, and Aurelia Bex was done pretending it was harmless. She was a respiratory therapist, 12 years in a Level 3 pediatric intensive care unit. She had watched more infants stop breathing than most parents would ever meet in a lifetime, and she trusted her training the way other people trusted a compass. That training was telling her one thing right now, and it was telling her loudly. The bird was a problem. Solstice was 9 months old. She had been sleeping in the nursery for 3 weeks, the first weeks of her life alone in her own room, and everything had been unremarkable until the parrot started perching on the rail at night. His name was Wexler. He was a 14-year-old African gray, a rescue from a widower's estate 2 years before Solstice was born, and until 3 weeks ago he had lived his entire life on a perch in the sunroom. He didn't bond with strangers. He didn't like children. He tolerated Aurelia and her husband Corrigan with the flat, patient stare of a bird who had already survived one family and did not intend to invest heavily in a second. Which was why the first night made no sense. Aurelia had gotten up at 2:11 a.m. to check the monitor. Solstice was breathing evenly. The video feed showed the crib in soft green infrared, and standing on the top rail of the crib, 6 inches from the baby's face, was the parrot. He was not moving. He was not making a sound. He was just standing there, head cocked, one black eye fixed on the sleeping infant in the specific posture of an animal reading something it could not name. Aurelia went to the nursery and put him back in his cage. She latched the door. She went back to bed. The second night the cage was open. Corrigan swore he had latched it. She believed him, and she didn't at the same time. Wexler was on the crib rail again. Same position. Same silence. The third night she moved the cage to the sunroom and closed the nursery door. At 3:04 a.m. she heard the specific dry click of a beak on wood. She went into the hallway and Wexler was on the outside of the nursery door, on the floor, walking the width of it like a soldier on patrol. She had read about resource fixation in captive parrots. She had read about the ways an aging bird could become obsessive, territorial, unpredictable around infants. She knew the incident reports. She knew the outcomes. She had the framework a professional builds when a professional has been trained to expect the worst outcome and prevent it. She called an avian behaviorist that morning. She left a voicemail. Then she stood in the kitchen holding her coffee with both hands and said the sentence out loud to Corrigan. He can't be in the house with her. Not like this. Corrigan didn't argue. He never argued with her about Solstice. He built a temporary aviary in the garage that afternoon, insulated, heated, everything Wexler needed. And by 6 o'clock the bird was in it, and the nursery door was open again, and the house felt, for the first time in 4 nights, like a house at rest. At 2:38 a.m., Aurelia woke to the sound of Wexler screaming from the garage. Not calling. Screaming, a sound she had never heard him make in 2 years. A full-throat vocalization that carried through insulated walls and up a flight of stairs and into her chest like a hand. She was already moving before she was awake. The nursery smelled faintly sweet. Solstice was on her back, arms loose beside her head, chest rising in a rhythm that was not right, too shallow, too even. The specific mechanical smoothness of a respiratory drive that had lost its variability. Aurelia had seen that pattern in the PICU. She had seen it in babies who were about to stop. She picked her daughter up, and the limpness was wrong. The pediatric emergency department confirmed it in 17 minutes. Solstice was in the early stages of respiratory acidosis from a viral bronchiolitis that had progressed silently overnight. Her carbon dioxide was rising, her oxygen was falling. Her respiratory rate had smoothed out because her brain was tiring, the last stage before it stopped compensating altogether. Another 40 minutes at home, the attending told them, and they would have been having a very different conversation. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The avian behaviorist called back the following afternoon. Aurelia told her everything. The behaviorist was quiet for a long moment. African greys, she finally said, have some of the most sensitive respiratory-linked olfactory systems of any parrot species. They evolved in canopy environments where they have to detect atmospheric shifts, humidity changes, air quality. There is published anecdotal literature on greys detecting respiratory illness in humans before symptoms are visible. He was smelling her breath. He was smelling the ketones. He was smelling the shift in her exhaled CO2. He was watching the one thing in the house whose chemistry was changing. Aurelia sat with that for a long time. The 4 nights on the crib rail, not fixation, surveillance, the pacing outside the nursery door, not obsession, a locked-out guardian, the screaming from the garage at 2:38 a.m., not distress, an alarm from the only creature in the house who could smell what was coming. Has your pet ever done something you couldn't explain until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Solstice came home 4 days later on a low-dose inhaled steroid and a home pulse oximeter that would alert both parents' phones if her oxygen dropped below 94%. Aurelia went to the garage that evening and opened the aviary door. Wexler walked out onto her forearm without ceremony. He rode her shoulder into the house. He rode it up the stairs and into the nursery, and when she stopped beside the crib, he stepped off her shoulder onto the rail without being asked. He settled into the specific stillness she had watched on the monitor 4 nights running. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Aurelia sat down on the rug beside the crib. Solstice was asleep. The pulse ox on her toe blinked a small green light every second, steady, the way healthy oxygen looks when a machine finally agrees with what a bird had been reporting for 4 nights. Wexler tilted his head. One black eye caught the nightlight. He did not look at Aurelia. He was watching the baby.